getting ready for our second quiz. Second trig quiz. I'll spit it out yet. I will make mention, as I have in class, that the information that I've got on here will be on both boards, front and side, to kind of help you out as we're doing this. So if we need to refer to this anytime through here, just to let you know that'll be available on the quiz as well. So this first one, I look, and I've got a cosine function we're going to be graphing. So I need to get the amplitude, I need to get the period, then I'm going to graph a period of this. So my first question would be, what's my amplitude on number 1? Okay. Yeah, I was going to say, I hope my point showed up. If it didn't, I wouldn't count it against you if you did that in a quiz, because maybe like, oh, I didn't see it. So 0.5. And again, my amplitude is always going to be positive. Even if there's a negative there, my amplitude itself will be positive. Then my period, what's my B value? My A value is 0.5. What about my B value? Is there a number in front of my angle measure? No. Okay, when we're looking at these, okay, my A value will be my amplitude. Okay, my B value, if I see one, is the number of cycles there's going to be. In other words, when I go then to find my period, it's that value that's in front of the x, my angle measure, that tells me what I'm going to divide that 2 pi by to tell me how many cycles there will be in that period. So in this case, since my b is 1, my period would just be 2 pi over 1, or just 2 pi still. Okay, it doesn't change at all. So once we have that period, again, we want 5 points when we go to graph. We'll start at 0. We always end where our period ends. So in this case, 2 pi. And like we've done before now, to figure out the other values, we just kind of keep finding the midpoint or averages of things. So I look here and I'm like, okay, well, what's between 0 and 2? Well, 1 is. And if I want to put 1 in front of my pi, I guess I could. And then we're just going to keep looking for what's in the middle. Okay, what's in the middle is 0 and 1. 0.5, or 1/2, or pi over 2. And some of you may find more comfort in saying, like, okay, so I got 0, and that was 1/2. And this is 2 halves, but 2 over 2 is 1. And so then this is going to be 3 pi over 2, and I'll warn you in advance. I'm looking for fractions. I don't want to see 0.5 pi, 1.5 pi. It's not showing our understanding of how this works when we go that route. And then 4 over 2 is just 2 pi. So if you want to see them fraction-wise first and then do this, that's fine. But if you're comfortable without it, that's okay too. And my amplitude, I'll get my positive and negative values for that drawn in. So once I have that, now I'm ready to graph. And again, if I don't remember right away how the cosine graph starts, I'm going to have this reference to tell me, ooh, I start at the maximum value first, or I start where my amplitude does. And then I just follow the pattern from there. So like with cosine, I go from my max to 0 to my minimum value, and then back up to 0, and back up to my max. And the only thing I've really got to remember then as I'm doing this is a curve. It's not an absolute value function. Don't just draw me a V with connected lines, or I might be a little bit like, I might have to take a little bit, because that's not really what this looks like. Okay, more curvy. Curve's the word when we're doing with this stuff. And that's all I need. Just graph my 1 period and I'm good.
So to start out as a positive point, that's how you start on top.
Correct. Yeah, the A value will always tell me where I'm starting. If it's positive, I start, at that upper value. If it's negative, I'd start below. And it's funny how you ask that question, because when we get to number 2, we've got a couple of issues to deal with. So I get here, what's my amplitude on number 2? Okay, my amplitude is 2. Now, my A value would be negative 2. And that A value of negative 2 means instead of a normal sine graph that goes from 0 and then goes up, yeah, this one is going to open down because of the negative. Okay? But it doesn't change my amplitude at all. So then I keep going. I'm like, okay, bless you. My period, again, I do have a B value this time. I do have a number in front of my angle. It's 4. So my period is 2 pi over 4. But remember, I got to reduce that, which is 1/2, or pi over 2. So I'm like, okay, so what's that mean for my graph? Well, I've got my amplitude, so I can get those values in. And notice again, even though it was negative 2 for my A value, I still do the positive and negative like I did before. We're still going to have our 5 points that we use to graph it. And whatever my period that I found is still is going to be the value at the very end. And we're going to build those other 3 points. So again, I look and I'm like, okay, this is like 0. This is like 1/2. What's in the middle of 0 and 1/2? 1/4. Now again, if I'm not sure, I have options. All is not lost. You can always take any 2 values, add them up, divide by 2, but then again, don't do decimals on me. Okay, so if I have to, I can do that. And if I'm still not sure, because you're like, oh crap, I got to cut that in half again because I need to know what's in the middle of this. Okay, if I did this last part in the calculator, just divide it by 2 again. But to be honest, if you just remind yourself, hey, dividing by 2 is the same as multiplying by 1/2. 2 times 2, oh, it's 4. 4 times 2, oh, that's 8. And I can do it that way too. But you just notice there's a lot of options available for you. So 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, 3 pi over 8, 4/8. Or again, if you didn't remember the little pattern, your other option that's available to you would be to say, I'm going to take 1/4, this guy, plus 1/2, this guy. Did I do something silly? Nope, I didn't. Or did I? 1/8. What did I? Oh, I didn't divide by 2. Silly man. Hopefully somebody, as they've been watching this, sometime would go, hey, dude, you didn't do any division there. And they'll be like, oh, crap, no, I didn't. Thank you. Because I still have to divide that by 2 because I'm looking for what's in the middle. So I get that 3/8 and I go with it. So, again, lots of options. But again, we talked about this here. Since I have a sine graph, okay, I start at 0. Normally, I would go up. I'd go to the max at this point. But since my A value is negative, I go min, then 0, then max, then 0. So if you ever have a negative A value, it just means your maxes and your mins are going to switch and become the other. And then again, I'm still looking to try and be curvy. But again, there's lots of things in here that can help me. But notice the only thing I've used the calculator for is sometimes when I'm trying to deal with some of these values and some of the fraction values. Otherwise, it shouldn't be too bad. All right, back to cosine. I'm just going to draw my lines in here. All right, what's my amplitude on number 3? 1. Okay, that's pretty straightforward. What's my b value? My b value is 3. So my period is 2 pi over 3, and that doesn't reduce anymore. So that's what goes on my last line. And again, we're back trying to figure out what goes in the middle. But again, I'm like, okay, 2/3. What's half of 2/3? Well, that's 1/3. So pi over 3. And then if we think about what I just mentioned on the last one, if you're dividing by 2, it's like multiplying by a half. So if I did this times 1 over 2, pi times 1 would still be pi, but 3 times 2 would be 6, and that makes it go faster. You're like, okay, but is that necessarily going to, fix me on every single one of these? No, but once I get that first one, remember, you're just counting. So it's 1/6, 2/6, which is 1/3, 3/6, which is 1/2, and then 4/6. So there's all these connections once I get just a couple of those initial values. Nothing fancy this time. My amplitude didn't change. I don't have a negative a value. So again, I just look, and cosine, again, typically starts at the max. Max, 0, min, 0, max. And I get my curve going. Okay. So again, it's just those couple little things that we do to try and make this go a little bit easier. Ooh, we'll throw a couple twists at you this time. Okay. Now we're going to see we're ready to rock and roll with these. So I turn over to 4, I'm like, ooh. Okay, what's my amplitude on 4? 2. So I got that part ready. Now here's where this one's a little odd, and we've talked about this before, so I'm going to rewrite this. And I'm even going to change it from theta to x here. So again, if you see one of your angle measures in a fraction, it just means it's a fractional b value. So my b value this time is 1/2. So 2 pi divided by 1/2. Which again, if I divide by 1/2, it means I multiply by the reciprocal. I multiply by 2. So 2 pi times 2 would be 4 pi. And again, now it just becomes building those middle values. What's in between 0 and 4? 2. What's in between 0 and 2? 1. 1, 2, 3. So even though that looked nasty, that one really wasn't too bad at all. And then again, I just got to remember where to start for my sine, and sine always starts at 0. So 0. And then again, if I'm looking at my help on one of the sideboards, I see max is next. So 0 max. That pen's dying on me. 0 min. 0. Curvy, curvy, curvy. Okay, and I'm set. So that graphing part actually is the most work that you're probably going to have to do on this whole review, or not on the whole quiz itself. So as long as you take your time, you'll have plenty of it, go ahead and get those set that way. So then I move up a little bit. Says, how many cycles does each sine function have in the interval from 0 to 2 pi? Find the amplitude and period of each function. Okay, so my big thing is from 0 to 2 pi, how many cycles are there? How many complete beginning to ends do I have? So I go, okay, well with sine, since it starts at 0, it goes until I get back to 0, and then I'm set. Back to 0, and then I'm set. Down and back to 0, and I'm set. Back to 0. So there's 4 cycles, which would be my b value. If I needed that for something. Oh, and I just may. Okay, so just looking at the graph, what's my amplitude going to be? How high does it go up on the y-axis? 2. Okay, it goes up to 2. Got 2. And even if it started opening down for some reason, my amplitude, again, would still be positive. And then find the period. Well, period is 2 pi over b. Oh, the number of cycles I found. Okay. And 2/4 reduces to a half. And I'm done. So that's how we kind of see the connection between the cycles and our period. And we're going to do that same thing on 6. Again, how many between 0 and 2 pi do I get? So up, down, back to 0. Up, down, back to 0. 2. Up, down, back to 0. So my b value is 3. Let's see here. What's my amplitude this time? 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And my period is going to be 2 pi divided by b. And sometimes it doesn't reduce anymore. If it doesn't, I'm good. And actually, if you looked at the graph, you could also see what the period was, even maybe without doing that. You're like, it starts here, it stops. Oh, it's a 2 pi over 3. Okay. So we got some options there. Now we go into equation mode here. All right, write an equation for each sine function. Now again, on the help, the general forms of the functions I'll have written out for you. I'm going to write it here too, though, just to remind us of a couple of things. Again, A is my amplitude. And B is my number of cycles. B is not my period. I use the B to help me find my period, but it's not that. That's going to be important to know in one of these. 7's as easy as it gets. Y equals 0.8 sine. Number of cycles, so that is my B value. 0.8 sine 5x. I'm done. Woo! Didn't even have to do any math. Just plug and chug. But 8, be careful. 6 sine, that's not my b value, that's the period. Yeah, so if I remember, my period is 2 pi over b. So that 8 pi equals 2 pi over b. And we make a proportion out of it and figure out what b is. Now sometimes you can just eyeball it and figure it out. Other times it'll be a little trickier. So when in doubt, we cross multiply. And then we solve for b. Well, since b is being multiplied by 8 pi, again, be cautious. 2 divided by 8 is not 4. The bigger number is on the bottom, so that's where the 4 belongs. So my b value is 1/4. 8 pi b. Because when I did my cross multiplying, 8 pi times b is what I had right there. And then I just divided both sides by that, and that's where my b value came from. Okay, and then I just plug that in and I'm done. And as we start to look ahead to that last sheet, you notice, hey, it's the same thing, it's just the cosine function now. So when I flip over, y equals a cosine, it's the cycles, so again, that's my b value already. Keep it simple. Second one again, I'm trying to make sure you're paying attention. Now this one, I don't think we're going to have to do all the cross multiplying and stuff. Let's look at this for a minute. Both my numerators are 2 pi. If they're equal, the denominators have to be the same. So my b value is going to be 3. Now, if you went ahead and did the cross multiply and divide, it's fine. You just get to the same answer at the end. And work that out. Okay. Now, the big one. You're like, why is this the big one? Because there's a lot of questions, and I'm actually asking you to explain some things so I know that you get what's going on here. Okay, error analysis. The student looked at the graph below and stated that the amplitude was -2 and that the period was 4 pi. What are the correct responses, which means they're wrong? Don't say they did everything right. No, they didn't. What did the student incorrectly think? So not only what's the right answer, but why do you think the student thought the answers were what they thought? So, first things first, move this up a little more. All right, let's get the right answers done here first. What's the amplitude? 2. What's my period going to be? Now that one you might look at and go, well, now that one I'm not quite as sure on because you didn't tell me the b value. Well, let's see. When I'm dealing with a graph that starts at 0, it's a sine graph, right? So sine graphs normally go 0 max. Ooh, that one went down. My a value must have been negative. So 0, min, 0. There's the end. Here, there is a period. So how far did I go? I went from 0 to 2 pi. So my period is 2 pi. I had 2 cycles go on through here, because there's another cycle over here, but that also has a period of 2 pi. So now, on the wrong side, they thought the amplitude was -2. Now, why do you think somebody would think that? We were talking about it a minute ago. Which direction does a sine graph normally go? It goes from 0 and it goes to the max. It goes up. Well, when's the only time that it goes down? When my a value is negative. So like here, maybe something like, since my graph started down, thought it would be negative. Even if you just wrote the part and it said amplitude is -2, since graph started down, that's sensible because you're like, hey, normally it goes up. Maybe this is why the person thought that way. But again, that's part of what you're going to have to be able to tell me. Now the other part, thinking the period is 4 pi. How could somebody think the period was 4 pi? Or is the person just being goofy, just writing down random answers? How could you look at that graph and possibly come up with 4 pi as a period? Maybe. Where does the graph start at? Where does the graph end at? How far is it from -2 to +2? 1, 2, 3. It's 4 pi from here to here is 4 pi. So maybe they said, oh, that's the whole graph, but well, that's not the whole graph. We only are looking at it for one cycle to be done. So maybe they used the whole graph, not just a period, because we figured out a single period is only from here to here, or here to here. But if somebody looked and said, well, it's just however long the graph is, well, that's not right. That's not the way we want to think. Okay, Now, like I mentioned, there may be a couple of extra questions on there tomorrow, but they're all going to be along this base. I'm not going to throw like a random factoring question in or something like that. I'll save that for a different time. But on these, take your time, have that done, and if you need some time now or even tomorrow post-quiz, because as you can see, this isn't going to take you the whole period, get that homework check set, so in case you go brain dead in the middle somewhere, you have that option, because the number of quizzes and tests is getting down low. We're going to have like a unit test here, a couple of quizzes in the next unit on stats and probability, and that's it. It's getting to the end here, so make sure that you're taking advantage of situations and giving yourself every opportunity to be successful.